Now the hunting design and setup on your parcel is critical. You know, that's what Dylan and I, part of what we do for a living, that's a big part of it. Dylan, I think you were you on 80 properties or 80 days?
80 days.
Okay. Yeah. And I know Joe is on around 70 properties this year. I would say Kevin is in that similar range, and then Wes will be going to properties this winter for 3 months. But bottom line is, this is what we do for a living, is set up properties, and you see some consistencies, and really what you learn by going to properties first. You know, back in the day before 05, I had a couple different properties, some area of Michigan and the UP, and I set those up, had a lot of success, developed my own company from there. But boy, when I've been able to see close to 1,500 parcels, and then Dylan's seen a couple hundred by now at least, and Kevin and Joe, they're in their second year, and they've already been over 100 parcels each. When you see these parcels continually, not only do you see what works, because we interview our clients, but you see what hasn't worked. And so when it comes to a hunting design, there's some very specific pointers that I'd like to bring to you that you need to have on your small parcel to make it work. Now, small parcel is relative. Anything under a few hundred acres, you set up the same. It's one thing when you start to talk 300-400 acres and larger, because then you could have two halves of a parcel. You can maybe have, there might even be a road going through it. There might be a house in the middle of it. You look at it as two halves or thirds. And let alone when you get to several hundred acres, 1,000 acres or more, because then you can have a whole back parcel that you barely even go to, and you just relate that to a major food source. But when it comes to a couple hundred acres or less, in this case, this chunk right here is 77 acres. It wouldn't matter if this is 77 acres or 17 or 200. We're going to look at it about the same. And first of all, we're looking at our access. Now, when I find a good parcel, you know, everyone says good access. What does that mean? It means you can access through your parcel without spooking deer. It means you can access through your parcel without going through the middle of a food source. We're out in our big food source here. This is our anchoring food plot for the entire property. What's interesting about this in the 77 acres, this 4.5 acres is a big area. We've had to carve it out of the brush, spray it, mow it, brush hog it. Didn't do that with any heavy equipment or small tractor. Use basically our yard tractor that's not a brush hog to clear the gray dogwood that was out here and spray multiple times. It was just a weedy field when Dylan and I were first out here. Remember that, Dylan?
Oh yeah.
It was out here, it was little clusters of gray dogwood and grass, and we said, we're gonna make a food plot here. And now here we are in the third season after that. But we need to be able to get on and off this property without spooking deer. If I'm looking at a property, I love to see multiple access routes. For example, we can come in the northeast corner, we can come in the southeast corner, and then we can come in from the west side. That's incredible access. We have 3 points of access, and the southeast access is down low all the way to the bottom, about 250 to 300 feet in elevation below, compared to the northeast and compared to the west. So we can come in low, that's all the way back in the cover, and then we can come in high more around food source areas. And so it gives us a lot of variety to come in and out. Now, I talk to landowners all the time, and we can always come up with a plan. You base it on your access, it always works. You can always come up with a plan. You can always make it better. I never worry about going to a client and saying, man, you've done it all. You've done it all. That's not the way it's ever worked. There's always a way you can do it better, because again, we've seen hundreds, if not thousands of properties as a combination, and that allows us to not only, again, recognize things that don't work, but recognize things that would or consistently work, and that's also reinforced by every property we go to. So it's easy to make recommendations. When it comes to access, everyone says, yeah, access, we need good access. What does that mean? But when it comes to access, I look at it like some properties really have a hard time. For example, you're going in a valley, the property's all around you, and you can't get in or out without the deer seeing you and spooking every time in and out. One of the things I want to point out real quick is don't be afraid to sell your land. People work on land for 8-10 years. They'll say, well, there's got to be a better way. There always is a better way. But that doesn't mean there's not a better property. And I'm here to tell you that you can take a good property that has all the right access, the different variety of habitat, maybe different access routes in and out, and you could have a great hunt in a year. This isn't something that takes 10 years. If it takes 5 years for you to develop your land to a great hunting piece, you're doing it wrong. It shouldn't take that long. If you have a good deer herd in the area, you should be able to tap into that in the first season, that 1 year, by just realigning food and access. So when it comes to access, if you don't have it, you can always work around it, but at the same time, don't be afraid to sell and upgrade. Don't just say, well, I've worked on this for 10 years. And we're going to keep going because you put so much into this. I can appreciate that. I've worked on properties a lot. My UP of Michigan property was 10 years. Started with 10 acres, added 120, added 80 across the road, added 53 acres on the National Forest next door. So we compiled and assembled acreage there and then sold it. My first property in the UP of Michigan, I owned 95, 96, 97, 98. I moved to the UP. So I didn't own it for very long, and I sold it. My first property I ever owned because I wanted to upgrade. And I had some strong emotional ties to that area. I'd actually hunted there for 10 years, some of my early hunting days. But the point is, there's always a better property, and it only takes a year to make it better, and it shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 years. You start talking 3 or 4 years, something's going on wrong, or maybe you just don't have the resources to put it all together. But bottom line is, there's a lot you can do that first year and get it right. But access is something that you can always improve on. I like 2 points of access to get in and out of your land. Maybe they're opposite sides of the property. Maybe it's 2 sides, you have 2 roads. Roads are always good. People think roads are bad, but you can screen the roads, and you can have good hunting on the back side, and now you can walk down the road and go in 30 yards and you're in a remote location that deer don't expect you to be. They expect noise on the road, they don't expect it 30 yards in. So you can just pop in and hunt. Not a bad thing, especially roads on 2 sides like that, or even a back road, front road, whatever it might be. So access is critical first. Now, access determines where your food plots go and when you can move through those food plots during daylight or darkness. For example, we can come up to behind that redneck. We can come up from the highway back there. We can come up along the ag field. But bottom line is, we can get into that location without spooking deer hardly ever. But if it's dark hours, we can't walk anywhere out here. We couldn't stand here, certainly. We couldn't even go through our switchgrass because something's going to hear us. We have ag on that side of the switch, and then food plots on this side. Big food, 4.5 acre plot out here. So we can't access any further. So if this was it, access was right there and that's it, we couldn't come in here. We'd have to drastically shrink this food plot and get around it. Instead, we can come into this point. We can also sneak along the side on the 10-acre strip by the road and get all the way around this point in the dark. But we don't even have to do that because we can come in at the bottom. So we have really good access in and out of this. We come in from the west over there. So the access determines where our food goes. The food determines where our access goes. We can't access through food. So critical. You have to protect that food plot. Your food plot is your #1 form of your sanctuary by far. We can spook out a random bedding area back in here, but we can't spook out this food source where they're coming to every single day. This is one of the last times we're even out here, unless we're coming out here to check out a dead buck. We'll be out here to spread urea on all this wonderful brassica that's shooting up out of our Big Boost brassica blend. And we have our fall power greens on the back side. A different mixture. We'll be putting nitrogen on the brassica, pumping this up. We'll be putting a layer of rye over the power greens because they're getting hammered. They're early season candy crop. And that'll help us have green on that all the way to spring. The bottom line is, we're not out here anymore other than that one planting mission there. We already have our cameras out here. Reveals are all, we have solar panels on to keep them going for a couple of years. So we're all set out here except for that one last trek. Access and food go hand in hand. Access determines where food's at. Potential food determines where your access is. And then what does that do for you? That determines an entire assemblage of stand locations that relate to the food sources and bedding areas and transition areas and cruising areas on the entire property. Food sources do that. So food, we have enough food to complement the entire 77 acres. We have 4.5 acres here. Straight across the hollow, all the way in there, Leo's plot's about 1/3 of an acre. We have about 1 acre right next to it, 1 acre on Jim's plot, and then we have a 1/4 acre pass-through plot down in the bottom. It's very remote. We access down from below in the southeast corner all the way down there. But bottom line is, we have little pass-through hunting plots in the form of Leo's in the bottom plot. We have some big plots that we can sit off with a blind and watch in between. And then we have a water hole right down here. We call it the Lost Track water hole. It's right down here at the bottom. We can get in and out of that without spooking deer. We have a corner stand that comes down into bedding along the 10 acres by where we can park on the bottom. We have a blind down the bottom where we can look down in the hunting plot. We have a stand on the hunting plot. We have Leo's plot with a blind we can hunt. We have Ben's water hole all the way in the back corner. We have the power line stand that's between bedding area and Jim's plot. So we have all these stands that are more bedding related or cruising we can use in the morning, our food source stands in the afternoon. And that's what happens when you have good access, good food sources, and a variety of stands on food and away from food. Now you have bedding area, transition, and cruising areas that you can use for morning and sometimes afternoon. You have food source stands, small food source stands that you can use in the afternoon. And then you have those X of stands that are in between it all, where you have food, bedding on all sides, and you just get into a nice thick corridor that's not right on top of either the food or the bedding. And you can have a great hunt for morning or afternoon. When you put it all together, when you have different access routes, it gives you the opportunity to hunt all different kinds of winds. And we can do that even with one access. You can go in one side, circle around, go in the other. The bottom line is you can always, on a property, doesn't matter if it's 17 acres, 77, 177, you can always have multiple stands. And we have a lot of stands around here. I'd have to add them all up in my head, but we have small hunting plots, water holes, our big plots we can watch with guns, our cruising area stands, and when we add it all up, we have about 12, 13 stands. That's typical for a size parcel like this. Maybe you have a 40, you have 7 or 8 stands, but that doesn't mean when you have 400 acres, you have 70 stands. You have fewer stands per acre as you go up. The bottom line is you then have choice, you have access from different locations. So let's look at it this way. When you have 77 acres, you want to install the improvements that are appropriate for 77 acres. Someone will say, well, I'm hunting 77 acres, but I can only afford to have 3 stand locations. I'd say sell the property, get 40, and then have the number of stands and improvements that make up that property, because then you're going to have holes in that property where you don't have good habitat, you don't relate to one side or the other. And what does it all boil down to? When you can improve from side to side, you can hunt from different angles, you protect the core. The core is so critical. These interior areas between all the white stand locations is that core. That's the percentage of efficiency we have on the land. The percentage that's all deer all the time, unless we walk into it to retrieve a deer. Obviously in the off season, we're going through it. People say, oh, you told me you ride your ATV in the off season. Not sanctuary. I'm talking about deer in the season, about 3 to 4 weeks before the season begins, all the way to the end of the season. But the rest of the year, we're having fun out on our property. We have a great time. That core area has to include your food plots. They're the most critical part of your sanctuary within that core area. If you're spooking deer continually off your food plots, you ruin the entire property. It doesn't matter if it's 200 acres or 17 acres or 400. You spook the deer off your food, you ruin it. Now there's less of an effect if you're in Kansas, Iowa, Kentucky, these big, beautiful, really nice fantasy land states where there's less hunting pressure and the deer can take a little bit more pushing around. But even then, if you want to shoot the oldest bucks in the neighborhood that are 5 and 6 in those fantasy land states, sometimes even 7 years old, you have to play it very, very smart. They didn't get that age by being stupid. They're very wise, very experienced. Because mature bucks are solitary, independent thinkers, they act a lot more spooky than a doe herd that you can kick around and has 1/5 the size of home range. They just move a little bit further away. When it comes to a hunting season setup or a hunting stand location, property setup on your property, you have to set up your habitat, your food and access water holes as if you can get on and off the property without spooking deer. That's so critical. That's the lowest hole in the bucket. It's not the quality of habitat you have, it's how you hunt the land. And what happens, like Dylan pointed out, we were talking about this video earlier, what happens when you have great food? It's a part of your core area. You have morning stands that are more bedding area related. You have food source stands that are more afternoon related. You have that definition and separation of stand type. When you protect the core, what happens as the season progresses? I guarantee over 95% of the people in your neighborhood are not doing the same. They're spooking the deer herd out. Their habitat's not lasting. They don't have the diversity. But when they're pressuring their land, whether they have good habitat or not, you want to be the only one in the neighborhood that is not. And think about those parks in metropolitan areas. They're 30 acres, 40 acres, and they have giant bucks living in them, even though you can hunt here and there around them. It's because the deer know that they can go in that 40 acres and they're not going to be pressured by anybody during the hunting season. Give the deer the illusion that that's happening on your land. And when you combine the food and the great habitat, it is amazing what you can do with 17, 77, or 177 acres when you let the access determine where your food is. The food's determined by your access. When you protect that core area, that defines morning and afternoon stands. You're careful on how you hunt it, how you approach, when you get on and off the property. Use the weather to guide you to success, and incredible things happen. You know, the cool thing is most people don't have any clue to how good they can have it because they've never seen it unless you're in that top 3% of all landowners. And I could say the number's probably even smaller than that have experienced an incredible quality herd. Most people have never even experienced close to the potential of their land. You do these things we've talked about in this video, you will get closer to experience the potential of your land. For that, your efforts are rewarded. For the off-season projects, all the deer chores we talk about, you'll create a great hunt, a great herd. You collect more bucks during the season. What does that allow you to do? Promote them to the next age class, build a great herd, limit the amount of does during the summer on your land. And it is amazing what can happen. I want to see you guys gather it. And I love it because I see the comments down below. We get all kinds of comments. We've been following these teachings for 2, 3 years, 5 years, and my hunting has never been better. You've changed the way I hunt for the rest of my life. You've changed our land for the better, for decades, for the rest of our life to come. And I love seeing that down there. Just check out some of the response. There's always a lot of negative nannies out there. I hope you take this seriously, put it to your property, apply it well, and you can experience not only a great hunt, but a great herd and building a great herd and a ton of fun and enjoyment for you and your entire family and friends that use the land for the rest of your life. Now, I appreciate you guys watching the YouTube channel, but I don't know if everyone knows everything that we have to offer, whether it's on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, our website, our WHS Wildlife Blends, our seed company. Also Instagram you can check out. I'm very active on Instagram, putting strategies on there, photos of what we do every day. Much more active there than Facebook. But our seed, web classes, books, clients, articles. I have over 600 articles on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, everything whitetail strategy. Of course, we have hats on there, and then make sure to check us out on Instagram again. But lots of stuff to offer. We're always coming out with new things, and this isn't the end of it. We have more things coming soon. Make sure to check us out.